All right. Well, welcome. We're at our Harvard Read Aloud. Hope you all had a fun February vacation. And now we're going to be. Baron had just let them in the house. They tricked him into letting everyone in the house and enjoy his hospitality and food because they're starving. So he's going to help them out, and we'll see how that goes. I'm not sure you want to be in the house with a guy who can turn into a bear. So we'll see how that goes. All right, we'll check it out. You ready, Connor?
Born ready.
All right. Inside the hall it was now quite dark. Baron clapped his hands, and in trotted 4 beautiful white ponies and several large, long-bodied gray dogs. Baron said something to them in a queer language like animal noises turned into talk. They went out again and soon came back carrying torches in their mouths, which they lit at the fire and stuck in low brackets on the pillars of the hall about the central hearth. The dogs could stand on their hind legs when they wished and carry things with their forefeet. Quickly they got out boards and trestles from the side walls and set them out near the fire. Then "Bah, bah, bah" was heard, and in came some snow-white sheep led by a large coal-black ram. One bore a white cloth embroidered at the edges with figures of animals. Others bore on their broad backs trays with bowls and platters and knives and wooden spoons, which the dogs took and quickly laid on the trestle tables. These were very low enough even for Bilbo to sit comfortably. Beside them a pony pushed 2 low-seated benches with wide rush bottoms and little short thick legs for Gandalf and Thorin, while at the far end he put Baron's big black chair of the same sort, in which he sat with his great legs stuck far out under the table. These were all the chairs he had in his hall. He probably had them low like the tables for the convenience of the wonderful animals that waited on him. What did the rest sit on? They were not forgotten. The other ponies came in rolling round drum-shaped sections of logs, smooth and polished, and low enough even for Bilbo. So soon they were all seated at Baron's table, and the hall had not seen such a gathering for many a year. There they had a supper, or a dinner, such as they had not had since they left the last homely house in the west and said goodbye to Elrond. The light of the torches and the fire flickered about them, and on the table were 2 tall red beeswax candles. All the time they ate, Baron in his deep rolling voice told tales of the wild lands on this side of the mountains, and especially of the dark and dangerous wood that lay outstretched far to the north and south, a day's ride before them, barring their way to the east, the terrible forest of Mirkwood. The dwarves listened and shook their beards, for they knew that they must soon venture into that forest, and that after the mountains it was the worst of the perils they had to pass before they came to the dragon's stronghold. When dinner was over, they began to tell tales of their own, but Baron seemed to be growing drowsy and paid little heed to them. They spoke most of gold and silver and jewels and the making of things by smithcraft, and Baron did not appear to care for such things. There were no things of gold or silver in his hall, and few save the knives were made of metal at all. They sat long at the table with their wooden drinking bowls filled with mead. The dark night came on outside. The fires in the middle of the hall were built with fresh logs and torches were put out, and still they sat in the light of the dancing flames with the pillars of the house standing tall behind them, and dark at the top like trees of the forest. Whether it was magic or not, it seemed to Bilbo that he heard a sound like wind in the branches stirring in the rafters, and the hoots of owls. Soon he began to nod with sleep, and the voices seemed to grow far away, until he woke with a start. The great door had creaked and slammed. Baron was gone. The dwarves were sitting cross-legged on the floor around the fire, and presently they began to sing. Some of the verses were like this, but there were many more, and their singing went on for a long while. So wind was on the wizard heath, but in the forest no leaf. The shadows lay by night and day, and darksome silent crept beneath. The wind came down from mountains cold, and like a tide it roared and rolled. The branches groaned, the forest moaned, and leaves were laid upon the mold. The wind went on from west to east, all movement in the forest ceased, but shrill and harsh across the marsh its whistling voices were released. The grasses hissed, their tassels bent, the reeds were rattling on it went, o'er shaken pool under heaven's cool, where racing clouds were torn and rent. It passed the lonely mountain bare, and swept upon the dragon's lair. There black and dark lay boulders stark, and flying smoke was in the air. It left the world and took its flight over the wide seas of the night. The moon set sail upon the gale, and stars were fanned to leaping light. Bilbo began to nod again. Suddenly up stood Gandalf. "It is, time for us to sleep," he said. "For us, but not, I think, for Baron. In this hall we can rest out and safe, but I warn you all not to forget what Baron said before he left us. You must not stray outside until the sun is up, on your peril." Bilbo found that beds had already been laid at the side of the hall, on a sort of raised platform between the pillars and the outer wall. For him there was a little mattress of straw and woolen blankets. He snuggled into them very gladly. Summertime though it was. The fire burned low, and he fell asleep. Yet in the night he woke. The fire had now sunk to a few embers. The dwarves and Gandalf were all asleep, to judge by their breathing. A splash of white on the floor came from the high moon, which was peering down through the smoke hole in the roof. There was a growling sound outside, and a noise as of some great animal scuffling at the door. Bilbo wondered what it was, whether it could be Baron, an enchanted shape, and if he could come in as a bear and kill them. He dived under the blankets and hid his head, and fell asleep again at last in spite of his fears. It was full morning when he awoke. One of the dwarves had fallen over him in the shadows where he lay, and had rolled down with a bump from the platform onto the floor. It was Boffa, and he was grumbling about it. When Bilbo opened his eyes, "Get up, lazy bones," he said, "or there'll be no breakfast left for you." Up jumped Bilbo. "Breakfast?" he cried. "Where is breakfast?" "Mostly inside us," answered the other dwarves who were moving about the hall. "But what is left is out on the veranda. We've been about looking for Baron ever since the sun got up, but there is no sign of him anywhere." So we found breakfast late as soon as we went out. Where is Gandalf? Asked Bilbo, moving off to find something to eat as quick as he could. Oh, out and about somewhere, they told him. We saw no sign of the wizard all that day until the evening. Just before sunset, he walked into the hall where the hobbit and the dwarves were having supper, waited on by Baron's wonderful animals, as they had been all day. A Baron they had seen and heard nothing since the night before, and they were getting puzzled. Where is our host? And where have you been all day yourself? They all cried. One question at a time, and none till after supper. I haven't had a bite since breakfast. At last Gandalf pushed away his plate and jug. He'd eaten 2 whole loaves with masses of butter and honey and clotted cream, and drunk at least a quart of mead. Then he took out his pipe. I will answer the second question first, he said. But bless me, this is a splendid place for smoke rings. Indeed, for a long time they could get nothing more out of him. He was so busy sending smoke rings, dodging around the pillars of the hall, changing them all sorts of different shapes and colors, and setting them at last, chasing one another out of the hole in the roof. They must have looked very queer from outside, popping out into the air one after another, green, blue, red, silver gray, yellow, white, big ones, little ones dodging through big ones and joining into figure eights and going off like a flock of birds into the distance. I've been picking out bear tracks, he said at last. There must have been irregular bears meeting outside here last night. I soon saw that Baron could not have made them all. There were far too many of them, and they were of various sizes too. I should say they were little bears, large bears, ordinary bears, and gigantic big bears, all dancing outside from dark to nearly dawn. They came from almost every direction, except from the west over the river, from the mountains, and that direction only one set of footprints led. None coming, only ones going from here. I followed these as far as the Carrock. Then they disappeared into the river, but the water was too deep and strong beyond the rock for me to cross. It was easy enough, as you remember, to get from this bank to the Carrock by the ford, but on the other side is a cliff standing up from a swirling channel. I talked miles before I found a place where the river was wide and shallow enough for me to wade and swim, and then miles back again to pick up the tracks again. By that time it was too late for me to follow them far. They went straight off in the direction of the pine woods on the east side of the Misty Mountains, where we had our pleasant little party with the wargs the night before last. And now, I think I've answered your first question, too. And again, often he sat a long while silent. Bilbo thought he knew what the wizard meant. What shall we do? He cried. If he leads all the wargs and the goblins down here, we shall all be caught and killed. I thought you said he was not a friend of theirs. So I did. And don't be silly. You'd better go to bed. Your wits are sleepy. The hobbit felt quite crushed. And as there seemed nothing else to do, he did go to bed. And while the dwarves were still singing songs, he dropped asleep, still puzzling his little head about Baron, till he dreamed a dream of hundreds of black bears dancing slow, heavy dances round and round in the moonlight in the courtyard. Then when he woke up, when everyone else was asleep, and he heard the same scruffling, scraping, scuffling, snuffling, and growling as before. Next morning, they were all wakened by Baron himself. So, you are all still here. So here you all are still, he said. He picked up the hobbit and laughed. Not eaten by wargs, or goblins, or wicked bears, yet I see. And he poked Mr. Bacon's waistcoat most disrespectfully. Little bunny is getting nice and fat again on bread and honey. He chuckled. Come and have some more. So they all went to breakfast with him. Baron was most jolly for a change. Indeed, he seemed to be in a splendidly good humor, and set them all laughing with his funny stories. Nor did they have to wonder long where he had been or why he was so nice to them, for he told them himself. He had been over the river and right back up into the mountains, from which you can guess that he could travel quickly, in bear shape at any rate. From the burnt wolf glade, he had soon found out that part of their story was true. But he had found more than that. There he had caught a warg and a goblin wandering in the woods. From these he had got news. The goblin patrols were still hunting with wargs for the dwarves, and they were fiercely angry because of the death of the great goblin, and also because of the burning of the chief's wolf's nose and the death of the wizard's from the wizard's fire of many of his chief's servants. So much they told him when he forced them, but he guessed there was more wickedness than this afoot, and that a great raid of the whole goblin army with the wolf allies into the lands shadowed by mountains might soon be made to find the dwarves, to take vengeance on the men and creatures that lived there, and who they thought must be sheltering them. It was a good story, that of yours, said Baron. But I like it still better now. I'm sure 'tis true. You must forgive my not taking your word. If you live near the edge of Mirkwood, you would take the word of no one that you did not know as well as your brother, or better. As it is, I can only say that I have hurried home as fast as I could to see that you were safe, and to offer you any help that I can. I shall think more kindly of dwarves after this. Killed the great goblin. Kill the great goblin. He chuckled fiercely to himself. What did you do with the goblin and the warg? Asked Bilbo suddenly. Come and see, said Baron, and they followed round the house. A goblin's head was stuck outside the gate, and a warg's skin was nailed to a tree just beyond. Baron was a fierce enemy, but now he was their friend, and Gandalf thought it wise to tell him their whole story and the reason of their journey so that they could get the most help he could offer. This is what he promised to do for them. He would provide ponies for each of them and a horse for Gandalf for their journey to the forest, and he would lade them with food to last them for weeks with care, and pack so as to be easy as possible to carry. Nuts, flour, sealed jars of dried fruits, and red earthenware pots of honey, and twice-baked cakes that would keep good a long time, and on a little of which they could march far. The making of these was one of his secrets, but honey was in them, as in most of his foods, and they were good to eat, though they made one thirsty. Water, he said, they would not need to carry this side of the forest, for there were streams and springs along the road. But your way through Mirkwood is dark, dangerous, and difficult, he said. Water is not easy to find there, nor food. The time is not yet come for nuts, though it may be past and gone indeed, before you get to the other side. The nuts are all about that grows there fit for food, and there the wild things are dark, queer, and savage. I will provide you with skins for carrying water, and I will give you some bows and arrows. But I doubt very much whether anything you find in Mirkwood will be wholesome wholesome to eat or to drink. There is one stream there, I know, black and strong, which crosses the path. That you should neither drink of nor bathe in. For I've heard that it carries enchantment and a great drowsiness and forgetfulness. And in the dim shadows of that place, I don't think you will shoot anything wholesome or unwholesome without straying from the path. That you must not do for any reason. That is all the advice I can give you. Beyond the edge of the forest, I cannot help you much. You must depend on your luck, your courage, and the food I send with you. At the gate of the forest, I must ask you to send back my horse and my ponies. But I wish you all speed, and my house is open to you if you ever come back this way again. Okay. Good night, at least for us. Good night, and we look forward to reading you next week.